The person you keep finding yourself thinking about likely does hold a place in your emotional world as well. Even if things between you feel unclear, complicated, or unfinished, there is usually a deeper reason why this presence keeps returning to your mind again and again. It rarely feels random. It does not simply happen because you are bored, lonely, or emotionally vulnerable in a passing moment. Something within you recognizes meaning in this connection, and that is why it continues to surface in your inner experience. This person tends to appear in your thoughts at unexpected times. When everything around you becomes quiet, when your mind is no longer occupied with noise or distraction, they gently return. In the calm spaces of the day, in the pauses between tasks, and especially in those fragile moments right before sleep when your defenses drop, their presence seems to show up on its own. Sometimes it even happens in the middle of ordinary routines. You could be working, talking to someone, laughing, or simply feeling fine, and suddenly their face, their voice, or a memory connected to them rises without effort. If someone keeps appearing in your thoughts, even when you try to move on, there is often an emotional thread still active beneath the surface. You may have tried to push these thoughts away more than once. You might have told yourself it is time to let go, that thinking about them no longer brings clarity or peace. You may have reminded yourself of the distance, the silence, or the confusion that exists between you. At times, you may have questioned your own mind, wondering if you are giving meaning to something that is not truly there, or holding on to something that has no clear direction anymore. Still, despite all of that, the thoughts return. Even when you feel like you have made progress, even when you convince yourself that you are done with it, they quietly find their way back into your awareness. This does not automatically mean something is wrong with you, and it does not mean you are stuck or unable to move forward in life. It often reflects something more human and subtle, an emotional experience that has not fully settled inside you yet. Connections like this are rarely built on logic alone. They are not created or removed just by decision or willpower. They form in deeper layers of emotion, memory, and personal meaning, where experiences are stored more intensely than we realize. When someone continues to appear in your thoughts without intention, it often points to something emotionally unresolved within the shared space between you. Something was felt, even if it was never fully spoken. Something was experienced, even if it was never clearly defined, and that emotional imprint can remain long after circumstances change. It is also possible that the other person carries something similar in their own way, not necessarily in the same form and not always in a visible or expressed manner, but as a quiet internal experience. People do not always express what they feel directly. Some emotions stay unspoken because of uncertainty, timing, fear, or confusion about what to do with them, so they remain internal, existing as thoughts, reflections, or moments of hesitation. This is why silence does not always equal absence of feeling, and distance does not always mean emotional disconnection. You may notice this connection showing up in subtle ways within yourself. A sudden wave of emotion without clear reason. A feeling of warmth, longing, or even sadness that arrives unexpectedly. Moments when something reminds you of them and it feels stronger than logic would suggest. Even when life is full and moving forward, there is still a part of your awareness that seems attuned to them in some quiet way. This does not mean you are imagining everything. It means emotional experiences can continue to exist beneath the surface even when external communication has stopped, and you are not weak for feeling this deeply. The heart does not always follow the same timeline as the mind. The mind can decide to move on, but emotional imprint takes longer to soften. When something meaningful has touched you, it leaves traces that do not disappear instantly. Those traces remain until they are understood, processed, or naturally transformed through time and experience. This connection does not necessarily ask you to wait endlessly or neglect your own life. Instead, it reflects that what you experienced had significance. It mattered, and things that truly matter tend to echo within us longer than expected. Confusion does not erase emotional truth. Silence does not erase what was felt, and distance does not always cancel the existence of an emotional bond. Sometimes distance is created by hesitation, inner conflict, or timing that did not align for one or both people. And even without clarity, the emotional imprint can still remain. You may never receive clear answers, or you might receive them at an unexpected moment later on. But regardless of what happens externally, your internal experience is real and valid. The thoughts you have are not meaningless. The emotions you feel are not random noise. They are part of a deeper personal story that has affected you in ways that are not always easy to explain. If someone continues to live in your mind consistently, it often reflects that the emotional story between you has not reached full closure yet. Not necessarily that it must continue in the same way, but that it has not fully settled into resolution. Human beings are often not disturbed by what is finished. We are most affected by what remains open, unclear, or emotionally incomplete. You may even notice moments when they come to mind during experiences that matter to you. Something good happens, and your first instinct is to share it with them. A small victory, a peaceful moment, or something that made you smile suddenly feels like something you want them to know about. That instinct comes from emotional association, from a time when they were mentally placed within your inner circle of sharing and connection. You might also find yourself wondering about their life, their mood, or how they are doing, even when your own world is full of activity. There can be a quiet pull that goes beyond physical presence, something that feels more like emotional attunement than simple memory. In Jungian love, this is often understood as the way emotional imprints remain active in the unconscious mind. The unconscious does not operate on strict timelines or logical separation. It holds on to experiences that carried emotional weight, and those experiences can resurface through thoughts, feelings, and subtle inner signals long after external contact has ended. So if someone continues to appear in your thoughts, it is not something to fear or judge within yourself. It simply reflects that something meaningful was once formed, and it is still in the process of finding its place within you. It operates through meaning, emotion, and what remains unresolved within us. And if you are still thinking about this person, it often suggests that something in your inner world recognizes the connection as unfinished in some way. Not unfinished in a literal sense alone, but emotionally open, still forming its final shape in your understanding. This is also why such connections often feel complicated. Clear, stable love tends to settle into clarity over time, where understanding becomes easier and emotional tension naturally softens. But when something feels uncertain, delayed, or confusing, it often exists in the space between closeness and hesitation, between desire and fear. One or both people may feel deeply, yet also feel unsure about what it means to act on those feelings. Fear does not remove emotional attachment. It slows it down. It creates distance where closeness is felt, and hesitation where expression wants to happen. That is why someone can matter deeply to you and still remain emotionally out of reach in action. You may find yourself wondering why, if there is care or emotional significance, nothing clear has been done about it. Why silence continues, why things remain unspoken. But emotional life is rarely direct. Many people carry strong feelings without knowing how to express them properly. Some are shaped by past emotional wounds. Some are still trying to protect themselves from repeating old pain. Others feel caught between what they want and what they believe is possible in their current life situation. There are also people who feel deeply but question whether they are even allowed to receive what they feel. So instead of moving forward, they pause, they wait, they hesitate. The mind tends to return to what the heart cannot easily resolve. That is why thoughts like this often appear when things are quiet, when distractions fade, or when you are alone with your own awareness. In silence, emotional patterns become louder. In stillness, what is unprocessed tends to surface more clearly. These thoughts are not being forced. They arise on their own, from deeper emotional layers of experience and memory. And there is something else happening beneath that. When this person comes to mind, you are not only remembering them as they are now, you are also reconnecting with a version of yourself that existed in that connection. A version of you that felt something meaningful, emotionally alive, or deeply engaged in a way that stood out from ordinary experiences. Certain connections do not just attach us to another person, they also attach us to who we became in their presence. And when that feeling becomes unavailable or distant, it can feel like a loss that goes beyond the person themselves. It becomes a loss of emotional intensity, familiarity, or inner aliveness that was once activated. That is part of why the longing can feel stronger than simple attraction. Distance between two emotionally connected people does not always mean absence of feeling. More often, it reflects timing, fear, emotional conflict, or internal uncertainty that has not yet been resolved on one or both sides. You may sense that something is still there, something unspoken or incomplete, and often that perception is tied to the fact that emotional experiences do not always end when communication stops. The psyche does not immediately close what has not been fully understood. It keeps it active in thought and feeling until it finds some form of meaning, clarity, or internal closure. That is why your emotions may shift. One moment you feel detached, almost certain that you have moved forward, and then suddenly a memory, a feeling, or a reminder brings everything back with unexpected intensity. This fluctuation is not contradiction, it is the mind and the emotional system processing at different speeds. Healing is not about forcing absence of thought. It is about understanding why something continues to matter internally and what role it plays in your emotional development at this stage. Sometimes such connections remain because they are still teaching you something about yourself. Sometimes they remain because expression was never fully completed, and sometimes they remain because both people are still evolving toward a level of readiness that does not align at the same time. Emotional timing is rarely synchronized perfectly between two people. If there is distance, hesitation, or silence, it is often because at least one person is dealing with internal conflict. They may still feel something, but feel unsure about how to act on it. Fear of rejection, fear of change, fear of emotional exposure, or fear of disrupting their current stability can all create delay even in the presence of genuine feeling. Love does not always present itself through action immediately. Sometimes it stays quiet. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it moves carefully, trying to avoid loss or emotional risk. And the absence of visible action does not automatically mean the absence of internal emotion. What matters most is not trying to force certainty before it is ready to form. It is understanding what this connection is reflecting back to you about your own emotional world. It may be revealing your capacity to feel deeply, your attachment patterns, your patience, or your need for clarity and emotional security. Whatever the outcome becomes, your experience is still valid. What you feel is not random or meaningless. It is part of a real emotional imprint that has left a mark on your internal world. And if they are still thinking of you in their own way, then the same human processes may be unfolding on their side too, quietly and without expression. In Jungian love, this is understood as the way emotional bonds continue to exist within the unconscious, even when external communication fades. The unconscious does not operate on strict timelines or visible proof. It works through meaning, emotional memory, and unresolved psychological connection. So if this person continues to live in your thoughts, it is not something to dismiss or force away. It is something to understand with patience, not as a sign to cling and not as a sign to deny, but as an experience that is still finding its place within your emotional story. And over time, that meaning will either deepen into clarity or gently soften into release in its own natural way. Pay attention, but don't overinterpret, and don't dismiss what you feel either as if it means nothing. There is a middle ground here that is often more honest than both extremes. When this person appears in your mind, notice your inner response. Calm, warmth, sadness, longing, even uncertainty or hope. None of these are random noise. They are emotional signals. They tell you something about what this connection represents inside your experience, not necessarily about a guaranteed outcome outside of you. One important truth to hold on to is this. What is truly meant for you does not require constant emotional suffering or self-abandonment. It may involve patience and uncertainty at times, but it should not consistently pull you away from your own stability, your self-respect, or your emotional well-being. Whether this connection develops into something real in the external world or gradually fades into memory over time, it is still shaping you internally. It is revealing how you attach, how you hope, how you interpret distance, and how deeply you are capable of feeling. Some connections are not just about outcomes, they are also about self-understanding. And if life ever brings you both into the same emotional space at the right time, it will not feel forced or like a battle against fear. It will feel clearer, more grounded, and more mutual in action, not just in thought. Real closeness does not depend on confusion to survive. Until then, what matters is not building a story around certainty, but learning to stay honest with what you feel in the present moment. When someone stays in your thoughts repeatedly, from morning into night, there is often a deeper emotional imprint involved. Sometimes that includes curiosity about whether the feeling is mutual. And yes, it is possible that the other person thinks of you at times too, even if you never see it, hear it, or receive confirmation of it. But that part cannot be fully known from your side, and it should not become something you are forced to assume as fact. Love itself is not always expressed in clear or visible ways. It can appear in silence, hesitation, or distance, but silence alone is not proof of love, just as distance is not proof of absence. People carry emotions in very different ways, depending on their personality, history, fears, and current life circumstances. It is also true that someone can feel something strongly and still not act on it. Readiness and feeling are not always aligned. A person may care, but still feel unsure, unprepared, or emotionally overwhelmed by what that care would require from them. Old experiences, unresolved wounds, fear of vulnerability, or fear of making the wrong decision can all create hesitation. But it is important not to turn every silence into a hidden certainty. Distance can come from many sources, and not all of them lead to the same conclusion. When emotions are strong, they often create internal tension. Part of a person may feel drawn toward connection, while another part pulls them back into caution. This inner conflict can look like inconsistency from the outside, closeness in thought, distance in action, presence in feeling but absence in behavior. That conflict can exist without it meaning one fixed answer. What is often overlooked is that deep emotional attachment can also create fear of responsibility. Not because the feeling is small, but because it feels significant enough to change things. And when something feels capable of changing your life, people often slow down instead of moving quickly. At the same time, the mind naturally returns to unfinished emotional experiences, not because you are meant to endlessly analyze them, but because the brain seeks resolution when something meaningful feels incomplete. This is why thoughts can feel stronger in quiet moments or return unexpectedly during daily life. The emotional system processes connection differently than logic does. But there is another layer that matters just as much. Sometimes what keeps a person in your thoughts is not only the person themselves, but what they represented in your emotional life, how you felt with them, the version of you that existed in that connection, the openness, intensity, hope, or emotional aliveness that became associated with them. When that experience becomes unavailable or uncertain, the mind can continue returning to it as a way of trying to understand or reclaim that feeling. This is why longing can feel deeper than simple attraction or curiosity. Still, not every emotional echo is meant to be turned into a prediction about the other person's current feelings or intentions. Some of it belongs to your inner world, your memory system, and your emotional processing, not to confirmed external reality. So the most stable way to hold this experience is not by forcing meaning onto it, and not by erasing it either. It is by observing it honestly. You can notice what you feel, when you feel it, and how it affects you, without needing to immediately turn it into a conclusion. Because real emotional clarity does not come from guessing what the other person is doing internally. It comes from understanding what this connection is doing within you. And over time, that understanding naturally leads somewhere, either toward peace, acceptance, or clearer direction in your life, but without needing to rush the outcome before it is ready to form.